All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Owen Ryan. I'm the senior accountant here at North New South Wales Conference. Also joining me today is Russell Halliday, our Chief Financial Officer, and Paulo Rodriguez and Maxine Pooney from our local church support team. Just a few some housekeeping. If as we're going along today, we'll aim to sort of try and finish by around midday. Hopefully, won't if we might be able to finish before that. We'll look at having a little break, sort of around the 10 hour mark, and please feel free to raise your hand and ask a question throughout the presentation if you want to ask a question. Down on the bottom right hand corner of your screen, if you want to raise your hand, there's an icon called reactions. If you click on that, it'll bring up a whole lot of different icons. And one of them is raise hand. So you can click on that, and then if you have a question or there's like thumbs up or stuff like that. So just use that reaction icon if you're wanting to ask a question throughout the presentation. There's also a chat function over on the bottom there, where you can also put in a question through that. So if you can click on the chat, and then you can type a question on there if you feel like you need to have a question that you need to ask. So this presentation is really to sort of go over the different aspects of the work involved with the local treasury at the local church. And throughout it, we'll be talking about a few different sort of jargons as we go along. So just sort of as we're referring to them, as you can see there, so when we refer to NNSW, that's North New South Wales Conference. LCSS, the local church support. TNO is your tithe and offerings. The tours system is the tithe and offerings online system that we're currently using. CMF is the our cash management facility, which is the main church central bank that we use. At this stage, it used to sort of give quite a fair bit of better interest rate than you would at the local banks. At the moment, it's probably offering about the same at this stage. GST is your goods and services tax. ABN numbers, your Australian business numbers. And when we talk about tax invoices, it's referring to any of your suppliers, whether they have business names and ABNs on it. All right. So moving on to the Church Treasurer's Manual. We've got that on our website. Can you move on to the next slide, Paul? Yeah, that one. So this Church Treasurer's Manual is quite, we've updated it in June 2020, and it's quite a valuable resource for you to have. It sort of talks about all the aspects of that involved with the local church treasury. So it's very handy to have, and I would encourage you to sort of to go through that. And the link is there up on the slides there. And if you ever want a copy or the link, just email Paulo or Maxine, and they'll be able to send a link out to you. All right, so I guess we'll you're all here today because you've accepted your nominating committee's call to be be part of the local church treasury team. I guess your local church, what does the local church expect of the local treasury team? Is that your records are kept up to date and are accurate, that they're regular and informative, and that the finances are generally managed within budget, and that confidentiality is kept, because that is a main part of being part of the local church treasury, is that our church members are donating tithes and all that, and and you would have access to all that information. So it's very important that we keep our members' confidence by maintaining confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
The church members will also expect that that we have integrity, and that we'll also have complete trust and confidence in our local church treasury team. And we do that by looking at segregation of duties. This is very important, that we maintain segregation between cash counting, the receipting process, and the banking, so that there's no one person that's doing all of those three functions on their own, or two people that are doing it together, so that there must always be different unrelated parties that would be carrying out these functions. I know this can be a bit difficult in smaller churches, where it's a bit hard to find enough people to carry these out. We do ask that at least be a minimum of two unrelated people that would be helping out with carrying out the church treasury duties. The same also applies with processing of payments. That payments are also that there might a minimum of two authorizations. So there's two unrelated people that would authorize the payments, and that your expenditures are operating within the budget that your business meeting and that your business meeting approves. So just sort of talking about conflict of interest. Conflict of interest is a situation in which an individual has competing interests or loyalties, and generally where they have a significant contributor to fraud and corruption, and should be handled appropriately by every organization. So here, that's also like to let you know that we carry out local church audits every year. So these audits are meant to protect you that are handling the money, and it's not it's where the conference sort of helps with areas where assistance is needed, and it is not an act of mistrust, but rather a protection for you. And it also assists with the local church board reporting, because all our audit reports go back to the local church business meeting or the local church board.
Mm-hmm.
So generally, when these audits are carried out, what we look at is the adequacy of internal controls, and also make sure that that the local church assets are protected, so that you have adequate insurance coverage, and that there is accurate record keeping of all transactions, as well as that you are also reporting quite regularly to your church members. All right, I'm now going to hand it over to Maxine to talk about the Treasury administration. Thanks, Maxine.
Good morning, Treasurers. It's great to be with you all this morning. Okay, so let's talk about Treasury administration. The North New South Wales Conference method of reporting is TORS, which, as you know now, stands for Tithe and Offerings Online Reporting System. This is a web-based system, and access requires a username and password, which you can obtain by completing the TORS application form, if you haven't done so already. And passwords are unique and must not be shared. So the benefit of TORS is that there's no need to handwrite receipts, as it produces the receipts for you. Reports such as the funds report, tithe and offering reports, and GST reports are automatically produced. And monthly tithe and offering are electronically transferred or rolled up each month. There's a chart of accounts that is structured. Bank records are easy to perform. And e-giving, when it's entered via the e-giving website, is automatically processed in TORS so that there's less for the treasurer to do, which is always a good thing. And electronic payments can be made, including direct debit and BPay. What are TORS limits? Well, it operates best on Windows-based PC, and it's only compatible with Internet Explorer browser, which you know is becoming obsolete as well. Bank reconciliations. These are an important internal control function, and it's a process that identifies the difference between the bank statement balance and the total church funds at the end of the month. All bank accounts need to be reconciled, and only recent items should be outstanding. On the Treasurer's Manual, page 19, you can see more tips regarding this. For example, the start balance should be equal to the end balance from last month. Any interest needs to be recorded, etc. Bank accounts. Each local church is assigned a CMF account, which stands for Cash Management Facility, and this is operated by the SPD and held at Westpac. The idea is that this one central bank account held by Division CCMF Limited pools all our denominational funds to optimize the interest earnings. What's important for you, the treasurer, to note is that each CMF account is assigned a unique 6-digit code that identifies the local church. So this needs to be used as the reference number each time you do the banking. Paolo will speak more about this in detail later. Interest is distributed quarterly, and authorized CMF signatories are required to complete the CMF online application form for access. Payments can be made from your CMF account, and these require 2 signatories. Local accounts. For operational convenience, some churches may have a second bank account other than CMF. This needs to be in the name of the church and a minimum of 2 signatories to authorize payments. The treasurer should arrange for monthly bank statements to be issued, and the balance should be kept to a minimum. Supplies. Please don't hesitate to contact us via email or phone if you require the TORS and CMF online application forms, deposit books for CMF, conference address envelopes, tithe envelopes, and receipt and weekly count books for the few churches that still use the manual system.
So all these items, all these supplies, we can post to treasurers who live, far away from the conference. So all those materials we supply. So you just ask us, and we will send those to you. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Record retention policy. So other than tithe envelopes that are to be kept for 3 years or until audited, most records need to be retained for 7 years, except audit reports, minutes of meetings, and legal documents that must be kept permanently. And for a complete list of this, just refer to page 10 on the Treasurer's Manual. What should be reported? Well, tithe and offerings, church income and expenses, and GST. Now, on the tithe and offering report, it should show conference tithe and offerings, e-giving donations, including tithe and offerings, local church offerings, income and expense, including GST, and conference transfers, such as transfers direct from CMF account to the conference for things such as K-Church, which is that current account that each church holds with the conference. And finally, church income and expenses also include things like rental income, repairs and maintenance, and church supplies. Documents that need to be submitted to the conference. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, go on.
We require, if you have any local bank accounts, for copies of the bank statements and the GST report with invoices and receipts attached, ideally in order. Key dates. CMF statements are usually available by the 25th of the month, except June and December. E-giving reports are available in tours by the 1st of the month. Monthly tithe and offering and GST reports are due by the 10th day of the following month. That's a real important one. And K-Church statements are also available via My Statements on myadventist.org, and these are in real time. Thank you.
Well, it looks like we have gone very fast, or
Sorry.
it's supposed to be morning break now. Should we, is there any questions so far? How many new treasurers do we have? I can see that there is 24 people. So 20 people are from the local churches. Who is completely new on this role that would like to ask any questions so far? Is there any? Has anybody asked you any questions, Owen, or so far? Like intern? Yes.
I've got a question. When would it be like you said it's best on PC, but obviously you can use it on a Mac. And the second part of that question is, you're utilizing Internet Explorer, which is just about dead. Are you upgrading to be able to access it via Chrome or whatever?
Yes. Who would like to answer that question?
Yeah, I'll answer that question. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, as you can see, the tithe and offerings system is currently operating on Internet Explorer, and that's kind of got a finite useful life at this stage. So there's a project that's currently underway to look at a replacement for tithe and offerings. So we're anticipating that we should have a software replacement sort of selected by mid this year, or probably the fourth quarter of 2021. So the South Pacific Division is currently running a project, and we're hoping that we'll have a replacement software by the end of this year.
I found it and I just ordered it.
So yes, does that answer your question? Sorry, who was the one who was asking? Is that Daniel?
Daniel.
Yeah, mate, yeah.
Daniel.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I think I just checked on the chat. There are some questions there, which will be good if we try and sort them out before we continue. is the Tor system unique to our church, or is it used by other churches too? So Tor's, I understand that it was developed by the Seventh-day Adventist Church information technology business in Sydney. So it was the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the one who has created this system. It's an accounting system tailored to churches, and it's just only the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the South Pacific Division uses this system. Which, by the way, it's now, as you all know, it's approaching its end of its life. So there are research and development in place at the moment to look for another system, another accounting system, but that is later in the year. It's not happening this semester. And then, yeah, so that's the only question I had there on the chat box. Is there any other comments or questions so far?
Paulo, Russell here. I think probably the only reason it's survived or stood the test of time as well as it has is because it's fully integrated with central bank and got a lot of integration with the central banking system to the point where people can be making donations to your church through platforms like e-giving, and it automatically pops up in your system. You don't have to write receipts and all that sort of stuff. So that's probably one of the reasons why it's still there. In terms of the technology behind it, it's long gone. As mentioned, they've got this big project running down at the division at the moment to search. They thought they had something lined up last year, and it was all looking good. And then they've hit a few snags, and the vendors were promising things that obviously couldn't be delivered. So they've pulled out of that and currently exploring other options on the Australian market. They've got some consultants working for them, Grant Thornton Consulting, and they're doing a pretty comprehensive view of the marketplace and seeing whether something can line up with a great long list of specific requirements for the church. So let's just watch that space with interest and hope and pray that something comes through fairly soon before some of these platforms it's built on, which at the time it was built were the major predominant platforms. That's how old it is. But of course, these things change very quickly, and they're now well and truly out of date. So yeah.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Russell. And somebody else is asking another question here related to the type of browser used for Tors. So Tors, unfortunately, only works with Internet Explorer, which also is going to be out soon. If you have a Mac computer, it still works. So what you can do is log in using Firefox or any browser. If you log into the myadventist.org portal, that is where you will find an application there called Citrix. And so you click on that, and it's like going into a virtual desktop where you find Internet Explorer, even though you are working on a Mac computer. So if you have a Mac computer, you contact us at local church support here, and we will hook you up on how to use Tors via a Mac computer. So that's not a problem. You're not alone. There are other treasurers also who use a Mac. And by the way, CMF, which is the central bank, that you can access using either Google Chrome. I think you can also access your central bank online via Firefox, Internet Explorer, Google Chrome. So it's more flexible. Just Tors communicates only with Internet Explorer. Microsoft Edge doesn't work with with Tools. I know that Microsoft Edge is, I think, is a replacement of Internet Explorer, but I don't think they will at service desk in our in the IT department here in the Seventh Adventist Church. I don't think they will work on making sure that Tools will communicate with Edge. I don't think that's happening. Yes, so that's answering Jenny Good's question. Is there any other questions so far? I think that's it.
I think there was one there from Ernie regarding
I may still
the tithes, the system that was down. The system did go down on Friday, and it should be up. They restored the system sort of by lunchtime on Friday, so you should be able to get on there now.
Yes. We all had issues with the internet, with the server here in the conference, so we couldn't get any phone calls, or I had to use the internet from my phone to try and at least answer some emails. But at the end of the day, it was fixed on Friday. All right. Should we move on, or?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, let's move on. Okay. Just one moment. Let me get into the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. Let's talk about something very important, which is income and what is involved on income processing and what makes up the income for the local church and for the conference. And let's have a look at a few things. This is the breakdown of the tithe. This is how the conference administers or its tithe. So this is the breakdown from last year, 2020, if I'm not mistaken, this breakdown. So of all the gross tithe that we receive from all the churches, 55% goes on evangelism and field work to fund pastors, evangelists, and all those evangelistic projects that we have been doing or that we do every year. And then 20% goes to worldwide church. That is the general conference, SPD. So 20% of the tithe goes there to the worldwide church. 13% goes on to fund our ministries. We're talking about youth department, young adults, church planting, women's ministry, all those ministries. 13% of our gross tithe is used to fund those ministries. 10% goes on administration. 4% goes on funding camps and conventions, and 2% for school chaplaincy. You will find that the breakdown of that is 104%, which means that we have spent 100% of the tithe received on that year on mission, and additional tithe-related expenditure has been funded from non-tithe sources, such as, for example, Big Camp Appeal. This is a very important piece of document, the offering calendar, the booklet, which you can find on the website, on our conference website. You go North New South Wales Conference on Google, and you will find the link, the website there. Look for the treasury department, and then you will find the offering calendar, the booklet. You will also find what Owen was mentioning before, which is the treasurer's manual. It's a very important document too there, and that's where also you will find our training videos. So essentially, out of 52 Sabbaths of a year, around 32 Sabbaths main offerings are for local church, and that is to help you fund all the operating expenses of your church. And all groups, all church plants, all companies, or actual churches, they all must follow this offering calendar. There is offerings for a number of institutions, Adventist institutions in our division. So those are the main offerings for each Sabbath. Now let's talk a bit about the cash counting procedure. So on every Sabbath, obviously you will have. But before I continue, let me put on the table two things. There are two ways of collecting tithe and offerings. One is via the e-giving method, and that is obviously our preferred option because that system, the e-giving system, collects the funds from the member. It allocates an entry on your ledgers as income, and it breaks down what sort of offering it is depending on what the giver has chosen. And then it also puts the funds into your bank account, and it's all done automatically. So you don't need to count any loose offerings. However, there is still also cash used in society, and that is on when people put their coins in notes on the deacons' bags, and also on the envelopes. Now, this document here is the weekly count sheet. So this is one is used for every Sabbath, right? And we break it down into four components. The first component is the breakdown of the Sabbath school loose offering, and then we have the main offering, which is in the middle, and that is where you will write what offering it is depending on the offering calendar that I showed before. So we just do a nice breakdown, and we also do. There is a third option there on the left-hand side on the bottom. Sometimes churches have another offerings, for example, to fund the renovation of a part of the church, or to fund maybe a youth minister or a Bible worker. So that is where you can put, write what sort of offering, a third offering on the left-hand side on the bottom. And on the right-hand side, you will find the tithe envelopes. What we require is that each envelope is, so you need to make sure that the actual cash on the envelope matches what has been written by the donor. That is very important, very, very important, because it protects you as a counter. It protects everybody that has been involved in the counting and in the banking and in the recording of the offerings. So just to sum up, these envelopes, we need to check that what is inside the actual cash matches what's on the envelope. We also need to make sure that on the envelopes that you make sure that it is dated. So make sure there's date there, and make sure that there is a name, obviously. Sometimes people just give just anonymous, just write anonymous there. They don't even write their names, that's fine. You just write anonymous on the envelope. Also, we need to make sure that all this counting of the cash is done at the church before leaving the cash, before leaving the church, sorry. We need to make sure that it is counted by two unrelated people. Okay. And also that's why you have on this document, you have the name section and the initial. So make sure that is done, that is completed. And what you will find on the right hand side on the bottom is the summary, and that's just the total amount for Sabbath school, for the main church offering, and then if you have a third offering, and the total amounts for envelopes. And that grand total is what will be banked on by the second business day. Okay, so we need to make sure that this happens, because that way the insurance covers you for if the money has been stolen or if the money has been lost. So that banking needs to happen by the second business day after the close of the Sabbath. Is there any questions so far? No, we'll move on. Yes.
Question.
Yes.
With the cash counting sheet, it said before you got to save the tithe envelopes for 7 years or 3 years or something. Is there any way that you can electronically save them and add them into the weekly deposit, such as in Xero, when you get a bill, you can add the attachment?
So for Tours, no, Tours unfortunately doesn't let us do that. It's a good idea that what you're having. Yeah, so you cannot store a soft copy of the envelopes on Tours, but there's nothing stopping you from saving those into a secure hard drive, maybe. But I think with the tithe envelopes, you can like as Maxine mentioned, on page 10 of the Treasurer's Manual, you find there the number of years that you need to store a piece of document. And what you find with the tithe envelopes is that they only need to be stored for 3 years.
Yep.
Or until audit time. So after we have audited you, then you can safely dispose of those envelopes, original tithe envelopes. Yeah. So look, here at the conference we have a bin for disposing documents safely. If you really don't have a facility for disposing safely those envelopes, you can always talk to us and we can arrange a time for you to bring any
That's all right. I can get rid of
envelopes. Yeah, there you go. That's fine. Thank you for your question.
Thanks, mate.
All right, next section. And then as I was talking about the offerings and the tithes, you know, these are the types of offerings or donations that we receive. So donation from members, bulk offerings, tithe and offerings received by the conference. What you find is very rarely some members, some trusts, you know, external businesses which are owned by members, they sometimes wish to pay their tithe and offerings via us. So we get that, and then we allocate it to, we tag it to the church where this member belongs to, depending on the communication, depending on the will of the desire of this giver. There is also tax deductible donations. For example, this is ADRA. It's a very typical one. They, you know, all their offerings, well, the majority, I think, of their offerings are tax deductible. So you can get, so if a donor on their envelope, for example, says, you know, $100 for tithe, then what you find is when you register, when you record this entry on Tours, if you choose the ADRA account, you will find that when you generate a receipt, it will say there, you know, this is a donation, that in this receipt is can be used for tax deductible purposes as well. So that's something that you can keep in mind if somebody wants to, if a donor wants to request from you a tax deductible for ADRA, for example. Obviously, not all offerings are tax deductible. Tithe is not tax deductible, and the majority of the offerings are not. It's just, I think ADRA is one of them. There might be some other ones. I don't know if Owen or Russell know of any others. But if you're unsure, always give us a call and we'll answer your questions on that. What type of offerings are tax deductible? And sometimes there are donations for auxiliary organizations, Asian Aid, for example. What we encourage is if a church member approaches you as a treasurer and say, look, I want to donate for this organization, which is not part of our offerings and tithe, what we encourage is for those members to pay straight to that organization. If you want to get in touch with those organizations, first you can talk to us, and then we will make sure that to give you the contact details for that organization, and then you can pass it on to that member, and then they can pay their offerings straight to those organizations. Okay. Yes.
Thanks, Paulo. Just interjecting here while we're talking about receiving. If any of your church members operate sort of unit trusts and are wanting to sort of pay their tithes out of that, we just get them to get in contact with the North New South Wales Conference, and we can then facilitate that that side of that for them. So.
Yes, thanks for that, Owen. All right. Now, once you have counted all your loose offerings and the tithe envelopes, all those funds must be banked by the second business day, as I mentioned before. And best practices for the banking to be done by somebody else who was not involved in the account. Obviously, we understand that that's not always possible for smaller churches. But if at least the person who is banking has also been involved in the account, if there is at least somebody else there, unrelated, in the account, then that sort of alleviates that possible segregation of duties breach. And very importantly, do not pay expenses from your offerings that you have collected. That we must never do. All payments need to be done on a separate task, which I will talk about in my next part. And ideally, what the funds that will be banked need to be done at the cash management facility account, or the CMF, or the central bank, as Russell mentioned before. Okay. And when you go to do your banking, by the way, that's on Westpac, on any Westpac branch. This is the 6-digit code that Maxine mentioned. So this is what the deposit book, the deposit slip look like. Date, the amount, and that number is very important. It's a 6-digit code. That number identifies, or will help identify at the CMF office who this deposit belongs to. And usually the tellers will know where to insert that number when you are banking. Yeah, so otherwise what happens is, if that number is not correctly inputted by the teller, it's not that the money will go missing. It will just be allocated into an account called unidentified deposits, which is also managed by central bank. And when will you find out that your deposit hasn't happened? Is when you are doing your bank reconciliation at the end of the month, and you find, hang on, I cannot reconcile this ledger entry for bank. It's not in the bank statement. Then you will start to ask questions. You will call us, and then we'll get in touch with central bank and try to find that deposit, and we will allocate it after. So that's what this 6-digit code is used for. All right. And just by the way, obviously the total amount that is here is the same amount, or should be the same amount as what is on the, let me go back, on the weekly count book on the bottom there, grand total. I think some people are putting their questions. I can see that there are it says here we have a count sheet and also a weekly analysis form. I'm assuming you are referring to there is a little green document which is called the weekly analysis form. Yes, so I personally find it redundant, to be honest, because the weekly count book has everything. So you can just simply use that. I personally haven't used that green book for a long time. Like, I don't see the point of using that document. I think maybe Maxine must know some reason why that document. I think it works for churches who have a little accounting system outside tours. Is that right, Maxine? Yeah, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. It's very helpful for some churches that are on the manual system and use a spreadsheet as well, just to summarize things. It's easier to just enter
Yeah.
afterwards. Yeah.
Yes, but if you only use just a weekly count sheet book that I showed before, that's enough.
Yeah.
That will suffice your work. So if you are looking for efficiencies, you can get rid of that green analysis form. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, let me go back to the slides. Right. So everything that I have spoken was the receiving of cash. You know, I would say manual offerings, and anything that is manual obviously is more. There's more work involved. But if everybody was on e-giving, on using e-giving, then that will simplify a lot of your work, a lot of our work. Again, because that is an automated system that records your entries, your income entries, and also records your bank in the bank account, and it's just a simple. It's a very automated system. Which we recommend. So that is on the website, egiving.org.au. And I think there is also an app. Yeah, so just continuing on e-giving. These are the methods of payment for e-giving that e-giving accepts. It could be via debit card or credit card, BPay, direct debit if you wish. And you can set it up as a reoccurring amount or just one-off. And the beauty of this system of giving is that they also have an app. I personally, in my house, we use e-giving, the app on the phone. Is very simple, just a couple of touches with your fingertips, and you do your tithing offerings. So that's very, very good. And we recommend to write whole dollars when you are doing your amounts, no cents. Somehow it doesn't like cents, just whole dollars. So what you will find on the e-giving system for donating, you will find there that you are able to find tithe, offering of the week as per the offering calendar. Then there are other offerings for each particular church. Then there is also local church offerings, conference accounts offerings, and maybe offerings for AUC and SPD. So you will find all those offerings there on the list of e-giving. And what you find is also that once your church is set up on e-giving, they will you can actually have control of the accounts of the local church accounts. You can amend the description of the offering. You can amend the name of the offering. You can amend also how important it is so that you can show it up above on the list. Again, we are always welcome to help you out with that. It's local here at local church support. Okay. And again, this is just what I have already said before. It's e-giving is communicates with TORS, and it also communicates with CMF. It does the receipts automatically. And at the end of the month, you come in, before you close the month, just simply do your bank reconciliations. Okay. Do we have any questions so far on income processing, e-giving? Everything clear? As much? All right. Next section, expenditure. Okay. We'll have a look at how local churches process their expenditure, how they pay their bills, and so on. Let's have a look. All payments require authorization, either by the budget, an actual budget, or a board minute. What you find is some churches have some policies on if, for example, if an expenditure is more than, say, $500, it needs to be authorized by the board meeting or maybe the business meeting at your church. And that amount can be depending on the size of your church, depending on the finances of your church. And TORS expense entry triggers payments in CMF. So it's a good system because you have the bill, for example, the bill in front of you, water or electricity. You go on TORS, create the expenditure, and then hit process. And then what you find is that system automatically generates a payment on CMF. And then you need a second person to come in and authorize that. And then that's paid to your supplier. So it records the expenditure and also creates the payment for you. And again, two signatories are needed to release the funds. And sometimes what you find is churches do not have too many or too many available signatories for the bank. Then you can always give us a call, and then we will help you second sign those payments. But we will need obviously two things: obviously the supporting document, the bill, the invoice to be paid, and also a form of a document proving the authorization of the payment. It could be a board minute, it could be an email from your church's department's budget holder, and so on. Sometimes churches have another account apart from CMF. We strongly I guess we do not accept that checks are pre-signed. That is simply not permitted. So avoid that at all times. If you find that the signatories for the checkbook live too far away, then obviously you do not have to sign the document, the check. You either have to wait until they sign after you have signed, or if that is too much of a problem, then you can talk to us and we can help you transition into making payments online. Okay. Do not pre-sign checks. And I think I have already said all those. We need two signatories to release the funds, and there should be appropriate documentation for all payments. Now, let's talk about the goods and services tax, or GST. As we all know, it's 10% it's a 10% tax on most goods, services, and other items sold or consumed in Australia. So we need to basically pay GST on services that are not religious or of religious nature. And we can claim GST back on your purchases if there is GST on the invoice. The conference ABN covers the local church GST. So basically, all the churches are under the ABN or Australian business number of the conference. And what happens is, at the end of each month, you send us your GST report with the supporting documents, and we will process that. We will give you back any GST that are properly claimed on your purchases, and we'll have to deduct the GST on your income. Okay, obviously not all income, just a certain number of income. For example, what you have is rent. If the rent is for so what you find is some churches rent their hall, for example, for an activity. If or sometimes what happens is there is rent for a part of your building which is used, and the rentee is a business, then GST needs to be paid on that. Or sometimes I think the Sabbath school pamphlet has GST. Now there is a question here on there are questions here which I'm trying to read. It says here, is there any educational clip that we can show member to introduce them to e-giving? Oh, sorry, that's e-giving. Yeah, look, I think that there are videos on e-giving. Actually, let me write that down so that we can send that to you. Send videos on e-giving. Well, what happens is last year we were having issues. You know how the pandemic hit, and we couldn't get any cash. The churches were closed. We promoted heavily on e-giving. So we'll send you all those materials. It says here, when you come to discussing GST, can you explain we are told to process refunds through CMF via journal entry. Can this be processed in income entry? No. The GST, once we pay the GST on your bank account on CMF, or we deduct GST if it's on GST on income, you need to process it via journal entry. Don't do it via income entry. And again, you can give us a call and we'll show you what goes on the debit side, what goes on the credit side, and we'll help you out with that. So yeah, GST processing journals need to be on via journal entry. Okay. Moving on. GST, yeah, so we claim GST on items purchased, and we declare GST on services goods supplied. I think I already talked about that. Now, what are the requirements for us to be able to process a GST, or when the GST claims are properly recorded? We need to tick some requirements. Okay. First, there need to be a valid tax invoice, and the word tax invoice need to be labeled on the document, on the invoice, and the invoice needs to have the supplier's ABN. Okay. And the purchase must include GST, and that amount needs to be stated on the invoice. Again, if you are unsure that a supplier is registered for GST, because having an ABN doesn't necessarily mean that you are registered for GST. So you need to register for GST. And suppliers can only be essentially you can only claim GST on a supplier's tax invoice if they're registered for GST. And also, you can also check this, whether this supplier is registered for GST on that website, abr.business.gov.au is the Australian business register. In there, you just type the ABN number, and it will give you a bit of some details on this number. Okay, and then check if the supplier is registered for GST, then you can claim the GST. If it's not, you are not allowed to claim. And what cannot be claimed under GST? If related to a church-owned residential rental property. Here's the keyword, residential. So you cannot claim GST on purchases. And if for food or entertainment for a North New South Wales conference employee, pastors' foods or drinks, sometimes there is social meetings. So the rule says that we cannot claim GST on food given to pastors. Do you have any questions there? Or we just seem, or to avoid that having issues there, let's just not give them any food. I'm just kidding, just a joke. But anyway, so those are the rules. All right. Now let's have a look at GST collected, right? So there is no GST on gifts or donations. They are free. You don't have to pay GST on those gifts or donations. All other income is subject to GST unless it falls under a GST concession, such as, again, residential rental income. And you must document the reasons there. So there is no GST on religious services, a service and not a supply of goods, if it is provided by a religious institution. So there is integral to the practice of the religion. So if you receive income for a service that is religious, purely religious, or to advance religion, then GST is free there. But if it is, for example, an income for a recreational activity that your church is running, there needs to be GST on that. So we need to be careful on that. Again, if you have any questions before you process all your entries for income, contact us. That's what I say there. And all these GST reports need to be claimed monthly. So once you roll over your period by the 10th of the following month. Okay, this is a very important date. This is what Maxine said before. We need to close our churches, our reports by the 10th of the following month. The last thing to do is to generate the GST report, attach the supporting documents, the invoices, the bills, and send it to us, and we'll process that to you. So we pay you back your GST, or subtract any GST that needs to be paid on income. Now, let's talk about something which is what happens when you have sub-entities. So what's a GST? What sort of things we need to consider when we have sub-entities? So sub-entities are, for example, adventurous clubs, pathfinder clubs, all those. You can choose to treat a particular activity as a non-profit sub-entity for GST purposes only. Setup of sub-entities must be documented in church's board minutes and have their own separate bank account. So what happens is you have, for example, a Pathfinder club, and so that you don't have to, well, if your board decide to treat the to treat this activity Pathfinder separate and not having to worry about GST, then they need to be documented. Obviously, we need to make sure that these sub-entities are set up, and there is a church board minute to have the creation of this entity, of this sub-entity, and then they need to have their own bank account. Like I said, these are the typical examples: pathfinders, adventurers, op shops. And this is a bit of, these are some considerations to have why an activity is considered a sub-entity. If the turnover of the sub-entity is less than $150,000 per annum, then it's not required to charge GST on supplies and cannot claim back any input credits in relation to the activity. So that there is not problems on, or not so much problems, but there is not confusion on GST, and it's just this Pathfinder club, for example, doesn't worry about GST. They need to be documented. The creation of that club needs to be documented by the board minute. They need to have their own bank account, and they have to have their own, so their accounting needs to be separate from the churches.
Yeah, Paolo, just on this one here, because Vernon was just asking about that. Yeah, this will make it very simple for your clubs to operate, because you won't need to have GST on their income, which would largely outweigh any expenditure claims that you would make, and that way it just keeps it simple. They'll just have all their fees go into that same account, and then they have their expenses paid out of it as well. But it's very important that that the setup of this the entity is minuted through your business meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So there are some questions here on GST, which it says here, for expenditure less than $75, can we still claim GST if we don't have a tax invoice? I understand that having a valid tax invoice is best practice, but if a church member forgets, etc. Well, so the rule says you need to have an actual tax invoice if the purchase is more. I think it's $82. If I haven't got the number. I think it's $82 including GST for the purchase. If you want to claim GST on that, then you need to have the tax invoice. But if you miss the document, if you lost it, the amount can be less than that amount, less than $82. But we need some kind of proof that this has happened. So for example, it could be I don't know, let's say a credit card statement or a bank statement from the person who has paid the goods. Now, if it was paid by cash, then what sort of document could we have? Any ideas on? Or I mean,
would a statutory declaration suffice?
A statutory declaration, yeah, it could work. I think could work. Yeah, I think. Yeah, but look, if for $75, what is 1/11 of that? It's just weigh up your cost and benefit to having to get that document done, get it signed by a JP. So yeah, just weigh up your cost and benefits of climbing these $6.
That's fine. The one I was questioning, they've sent me through their credit card statement and
credit card statement, perfect. Yeah,
receipt, so it's all cool.
So what you could do is, yes, so make sure you can get the copy of the statement. Obviously, you can fade out any other confidential information on that person's credit card statement, and just show us the proof that it was paid. Then that's fine. Now there is another question here: is GST payable on DVD of the church service, which are given to contacts? Members just give a donation to DVD. Well, that's a tricky one. I think, well, the DVD is an actual good. I just not sure if Jenny is asking whether on the income receiving. I guess you can receive, you can, if somebody is donating funds so you can consider it as local budget. So you wouldn't pay GST on that, or local budget income. We don't pay GST on offerings given to your church for local income, there's no GST on that. But if you are paying the GST for, sorry, if you are paying for the purchase of the DVDs, then you can claim GST on that. Do you see it that way, Maxine? You're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm just messaging some of our
Yeah. So
participants. Sorry.
What Jenny was asking is Jenny Coots. So she's saying the one receiving the DVD gives a donation of approximately $2 to the AV team, who then gives the money to me. Okay. Well, you can consider this as a local income, and it's just local income. There's no GST on that.
No.
That's
So
correct.
don't worry about GST on
Yeah.
that. It's on the purchase side of things. When you buy DVDs, then that you can claim GST on that. So on the receiving of the income, don't worry about paying GST on that. It's just local income, local church income, no GST. Okay, just moving on. We were talking about sub entities, and yeah, like as Owen said, so that you keep this entity or this activity, Pathfinder, for example, simple in terms of GST processing. They need to be that activity need to be created and documented at the church at a minute, and they need to have their own bank account. They need to record their income and expenses separately, and also the income for a year for this activity needs to be less than $150,000 per annum. If not a sub-entity, then GST can be claimed, but GST also needs to be paid on income. And this is something that I already said. Okay. Now, let's talk about an aspect, which is the way how the conference on charges or passes on charges to the churches, and how we sometimes give them credits, adjustments on a current account. The account is called K-Church. And this K-Church is basically also available via, I guess this K-Church statement is available via the My Statements application, which is found on the My Adventist portal. So basically, you can see live what the what the charges are to your church from us. It could be insurance, it could be children's ministry hire, it could be wages. So the K-Church account is how this is the channel where we pass on charges, and this is also a channel where how you pay your how you make those payments too. And that is found on the website, on my Adventist website. Now, if you do not currently have access to my statements, contact us, and we will make sure that's happening for you. Okay. So yeah, so that's the current account, and those are the types of sorry. Oh, what did I do? Sorry. Sorry about that. I pressed the wrong button. Apologies. I went to the end. Sorry about that. There you go. Okay, so what I was saying is those are the typical types of expenditure that or charges that we pass on to our churches. Children's ministry, resource center, which is paid via a CMF transfer, Adventist website, fees, which also need to be paid by the treasurer via CMF transfer. There are insurances, there are electricity charges from 2021, and wage charges. Those three amounts, those three types of expenditure are direct debited. Okay, electricity charges is a new one, which will happen from this year. It's already happening. Some churches who have, you might recall that last year for the treasurers who have been in the role for some time now, you might remember that last year we have emailed you a survey for the types of expenditure that you usually have and who is your supplier and the amounts. So electricity is a project that we have taken on, in where we have done some research and found good prices for electricity. So some churches will be, well, you can contact us if you want to be in this project, but we strongly recommend, because you will find good prices for electricity, and we will direct debit those charges. Again, contact us if you need more details. But essentially, insurances, electricity charges, and wages, we direct debit. Let's talk about wages. Sometimes you have some cleaners, you have Bible workers, clerks, church clerks, who your church board has decided to have them on payroll, right? So this is how we on charge those expenditures. We do not pay cash on to them. It needs to be via payroll. Okay. Minimum wages needs to be paid, and there is sometimes casual or permanent employees. And you can contact us for more information. But essentially, if you decide to have an employee, then they will be in our payroll. We will pay the employee every fortnight, and also we will on charge to your K-Church account, and we will direct debit. And what you will find is that you will record those expenditures in your accounting system, in your TORS system, and you can either pay it via CMF transfer if it is not a direct debit. But if it is a direct debit type of expenditure, then you just simply do the following. I will explain. I will show this to you. This is a screenshot of what the express payment entry screen look like in TORS. This is how you make your payments from TORS. You populate the date. In this scenario, we are paying children's ministry equipment hire. We do not direct debit those type of expenditure. So you need to make the payment or start the payment. You populate the date. Obviously, all those dates you will see from your My Statements account that I mentioned before. And this is important, the payment method. You need to choose CMF internal. CMF internal. That will trigger the payment on CMF to us. So we'll record the expenditure and it will trigger the payment, and the funds will be released. And again, you will need a second person to authorize that in. Sorry, no, I'm just going ahead to myself. This CMF internal does not require a second person to authorize, because that is paid when you do the rollover of the month. You can call us to help you with this kind of entries, and then to help you close the month. Okay, so CMF internal is for this kind of payments that are not direct debited by us. Yeah, and now, yes.
Can we just go back a bit, just back up a bit to the wages bit?
Yeah.
I just sort of want to just reiterate the importance of not paying if you're engaged someone at the local church that doesn't have an ABN number and is not a contractor, and that you are paying them to carry out work at your local church, such as cleaners, or if you're employing them to do children's ministries or something like that. It is very important that they are issued a employment contract and employed through the proper channels using and put on the payroll, because otherwise they won't be covered by workers' compensation. So it's very important that they are put on there, unless if they do have an ABN number, then they can then invoice the church and you can pay them as a contractor. But if not, they need to be on the payroll.
Very good. Thank you for that. Those are very important points to consider. Thank you. Yes, so we just going back to our scenarios. This is for when those are charges that are not direct debited. You choose CMF internal as the payment method. If you are going to process a charge that has been direct debited, where will you see that? You will see that on your CMF statement, right? And also on your My Statement for K Church. So you will see that where on those two documents that it has been direct debited. It's been charged and then direct debited. So typically the conference will raise the charge, then direct debits from local church CMF account will happen. Again, those are the three examples, or I guess the only type of expenditure that we direct debit. And this is what the screen will look like. So the key difference is payment method. You choose as check. So that does not create and does not trigger a payment again from CMF. Okay. Is there any questions on so far on expenditure? Expense processing? No. What about on the chat box? Nobody has written anything. Otherwise, we'll just go on to the next section, budgeting. Maxime Puni.
Just before Maxine goes on, I've just noticed that the time's ticked over to 10:26. Do we want to keep going, or do we want to take a break?
I would like to take a break. I don't know everybody else.
All right. Well, why don't we just take a
5-minute
break, and then we'll start up again at around 10:30.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. Hi, everyone. We're back and we'll move on to budgeting. Okay, so what is a budget? Oh, Paula's not back to move our slide. We might just wait for Paolo to come back. Jenny, could I ask you to look up a scripture verse, please, in Luke 14, 28 to 30, if you don't mind doing that for us, and I'll get you to read that shortly.
Okay, what was it? Luke 14?
Yeah.
Yep.
Verse 28 to 30.
Yep.
So yep. Thanks. Just have that ready.
Yep.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Owen's Paolo now, guys. All right. So what is a budget? It's an estimate of income and expenses for your local church for a set period, in your case, a year. It's a financial plan for the church that provides guidance for spending within each department or ministry. It's basically a benchmark for tracking your income and expenses that helps you set an expectation for the funds coming in. It identifies wasteful expenditure and helps prioritize its use. So why have a budget? The importance of having a budget is mentioned in the Bible. And Jenny will read Luke 14, verse 28 to 30. Thanks, Jenny.
Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, "This fellow began to build and was not able to finish."
Thank you. So from this passage, it is clear that we have a responsibility to be good stewards of how money is received in the church and how it's being spent. The pros of having a budget include having maximum impact with limited resources, detecting early on unexpected or unwanted trends in money coming in and money going out, so it helps reduce the risk of overspending. Departmental leaders will have clear boundaries, and it reduces the need for day-to-day approvals for every transaction. So a budget builds trust within the local church because members know where the church money is going. So how do we prepare a budget? There are a few ways to do this or to approach this. You can start with last year's budget and then adjust it to reflect actual income and expenses. Or you can start with a zero base and build an estimate of future income and expenses based on the church's planned activities. It's important to do this in consultation with the pastor and each department or ministry leader. And for more detail, please refer to our training video on budgeting on our conference website from minute 21. Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. Thanks, Owen.
All right. I'd not like to talk to you about our insurances. The church runs its own insurance program called Risk Management Services, or largely referred to as RMS, and which has its offices in Wahroonga. the covers that are offered. So there's property, cash, extra risks, public liability, and personal accident insurance covers. For property, this will cover all your buildings and the contents. This is generally renewed. It's renewed in July, and so what happens is you would get all your insurance certificates, which come out sort of late May, early June, and it is important that you review them and make sure that there is adequate cover in there. And if the coverage isn't adequate, you make contact with us in RMS to make sure that the coverage is adequate. At the moment, RMS have engaged Marsh, which is a external insurance consultants, to come out to all of our churches to survey the property to make sure that the current building coverage is adequate to rebuild if there is ever a fire or an earthquake or something along those lines. So some of you would have already had the Marsh consultant come out, and we're noticing some of the amendments that are starting to sort of come through. So one thing to note with property, the property coverage, it doesn't cover property in transit or portable items or motor vehicles and trailers. So these have to be specifically sort of laid out. I think I've got a hand raised from Greg. Greg, did you have a question?
Oh, I think Greg was saying goodbye, maybe.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh, I know. Or maybe a high five.
Okay. All right. We'll continue on. So the next one is cash. So this is covered in your property and contents coverage, and it'll cover any cash that has already been receipted. So that's why when we were talking about the receipting earlier on in the income section, it's important that you have the cash counted and recorded at the church on Sabbath before the cash leaves the premise. And then that way you have those two, that carbon copy that stays at the church and the cash count sheet that goes with the cash to be banked. So that cash would then be covered for 2 business days before it is banked. So that's why it's important to have it banked within the 2 business days of the weekend. If the cash to be banked is more than $10,000, then you would require 2 people to go to the bank to deposit that amount. It is also important that if the cash is kept, that it's safe at the church. All right, our extra risk. So these are coverage for items that are moved around. Okay, so these are the ones that you sort of are movable. So there are 3 types of coverage. So there's a blanket cover, but won't cover any computers that you have at the church. So so you can sort of nominate an amount, sort of say $5,000, $15,000, or you can have a list out the items specifically. So you can where you have your equipment, you can list out the equipment specifically with the amounts, the replacement amounts listed. Or you can apply for temporary cover for an event that you'll be having, where you'll have items that would be moved off site. So you can then have apply for a specific coverage for that event, which would only last for the duration. And another thing to note is that the extra risk won't can also cover non-owned equipment while it is being used. Public liability. The churches are approved automatically for any, and that is charged through annually. When you do end up, if you do end up leasing your church, you can request the cover from a hirer. So if you say like if you have a different group come in and hire your facilities, you can ask them specifically to have coverage for that particular leasing period. The public liability protects the church against claims where the church may have been negligent. For our personal accident, this covers all volunteers, so that's everyone that's on the church roll, okay, and who is also engaged in approved activity. So that's why everyone that's sort of carrying out a role within the church has to be on the church roll, and that coverage we usually sort of base the personal accident coverage on the people that are on the church roll that comes through. So this will also include can also include pathfinders and adventurer programs, but as an additional cost. So in the event of a loss, or you need to notify RMS and the police if there was a break-in, prevent any further loss. Don't dispose of any damaged equipment. Okay, so keep those until the insurance claim has been paid out, and complete a loss notification form and return that to the conference office. So you can find this the loss notification form on the RMS website, which is rms.org.au, and you can go into the forms there and you can download that. You can also claim request a public liability certificate if you're hiring a hall. So you can go onto the RMS website and fill in the form there, and they would send out a coverage for public liability for hall hireage. All right. Is there any questions regarding insurance? I've got a question here from Joy. So additional costs to cover pathfinders. So that gets sort of calculated based on the number of pathfinders and adventurers that are currently sort of registered. Yeah, we get that off the youth department.
I don't think that's super expensive, is it, Owen?
No, no, it's not. So.
I don't know how many dollars that is off the top of my head, but yeah, I sort of retired recently from being director of a Pathfinder club at my local church for around 7 years, and the key insurances there in Pathfinders was the one that's referred to there by Joy, which is a per Pathfinder charge. It's a few dollars or something. There's obviously personal accident for your leaders. That's also automatically included for your church and gets charged in bulk. Doesn't necessarily get split off into Pathfinders as such. The main areas that I used to update as the Pathfinder director were more the extra risks for all the camping equipment and gear that we had, which was quite a bit when it all adds up, so it can include all kinds of equipment, tents, trailers, canoes, depends how big your club is, how much gear you've got. So whilst it's obviously stored at the church, it'll be included in the contents of the building. But as soon as it's out and about at camps and things, you want to make sure all that gear is listed separately on your extra risks and updated. We used to update it once a year at our working bee and delete off stuff that wasn't there and add on new things. So that's just a specific comment around Pathfinder's insurance.
All right. Well, I'll hand it over to Russell for the repairs and maintenance.
Thank you, Alan. You're very kind. So I'm since retiring from Pathfinder director, I've now a church treasurer, which is a lot of fun. Haven't been for a few years, but it's good to get back into it again. And repairs and maintenance is a big ticket item. Probably more concerns churches that own buildings if you're just renting. And a lot of church plans don't own a building. If you're just renting, this section probably isn't so applicable, but might be in the future should your church decide to launch out and acquire facilities and have some more permanent things. So for those churches that do have property and facilities, repairs and maintenance can be a big ticket item. Some years you won't have much to spend. Other years you'll it can get really, really expensive. We had quotes the other day, for example, at our church to replace some of the big air conditioning units that do the church and the hall. And, the quotes are coming in at around $70,000 and this sort of thing. So obviously very careful planning needs to be involved with some of these items. And some repairs and maintenance items do occur rather infrequently. An example would be replacing carpets, painting of facilities, some of these big ticket items. And so it's very important that we're prepared for when those expenditure items happen and we can actually pay for them, ideally. Otherwise, the church will be in a little bit of trouble. So why do we maintain our church facilities? There's a couple of suggestions there on the slides. But, clearly, once the decision is made to acquire facilities, there comes with that responsibilities. Obviously, any member of the church that comes on site, any member of the public that comes on site, we have a duty of care to those people. And that does infer that we're keeping a watchful eye for things that gear and equipment that's working properly. And it's free from hazards and dangers and those sorts of things, which obviously is very closely aligned with work health and safety that most of us would be very familiar with. Consequences, of course, of claims and litigation in this area are quite large and significant. And we don't want to be, putting our church at risk with those type of things for the sake of, some good preventative maintenance. So it's interesting to see the approaches that are taken by different churches as I happen to go around the conference, auditing churches and the like. A common approach is really just an ad hoc approach. In other words, let's wait and see what the year brings forth in terms of maintenance and deal with it when it comes. The danger there I've already alluded to is that, things that could have easily been predicted and saved up for as the church suddenly might hit us in 1 year, and we literally don't have the funds to pay for them. And we've got to then go and fundraise, and it could be 4 or 5 years before we've saved up enough money to do some of these urgent repairs. So an ad hoc approach is not preferred, but it is rather common, and one that's prevalent probably because it's easy and we don't need to plan for the future too much with it. Program maintenance schedule is obviously recommended for all of our church facilities. This takes a proactive approach. It involves inspection of the church facilities room by room. and having a look in those rooms to see which items potentially are wearing out and what are depreciating, whether it's equipment inside the rooms, whether it's the structure itself, painting, air conditioners, and so on. All of those things have useful lives, and they all will have to be replaced at some point in the future. It's just a matter of when, not if. So it's a matter of recording all those items. This doesn't need to be done by the treasurer necessarily. Could be done by deacon. Someone's got a little bit of time. Someone may be a little experience in building. It would be an advantage, and it's got interest in these sort of things. They could go through, make that list. Perhaps others in the church could help with a little bit of costing in some of those areas. And we're just sort of coming up with a sense of, in the next 5-10 years, what are the sort of expenses coming down the pipeline towards us around preventative maintenance in our church? And then the question where the treasurer is going to get involved with is how we're going to fund those items when they come up. A sinking fund is another proactive approach where once we've done our preventative maintenance schedule, we actually work out, well, in 5 years' time, we're going to have to come up with a certain amount of, thousands of dollars to just to keep the place maintained. Perhaps we could spread that fundraising or those costs and start to save up, if you like, in a sinking fund for those amounts as and when they fall due. So churches that have this sort of approach, it's not panic stations when we've got to replace the carpet, which might come in at $20,000, $30,000, not uncommon, easily, or even greater. It's not panic stations. It's okay. We've already got the money in place. We were expecting this. It's no shock, surprise, horror. The carpets need replacing. We could see it coming for many, many years prior, and we've actually got the funds there in place. So, so that's just a bit of an overview of some of the different, methods that you might see in different churches around the place. And you might have your own church. You might think of particular examples or scenarios, but. Yeah, any comments, questions on building repairs and maintenance? So there's a question come here from Jenny around what training, if any, is being provided to work health and safety officer in each church. I was given a brief overview of what I'm to do, but in talking about the work health and safety team and the training team, I don't have any training. How do I train others? So it's a good question. We do have a work health and training person at our office that has resources and things available, so we can certainly put them in touch with our different churches, treasurers, administrators. A lot of churches like Tamworth there that Jenny's referring to would have an appointed work health and safety officer, and unfortunately, a lot of churches, people are going to be wearing multiple hats and so have limited time. I don't know, Jenny, what resources are available in that space, but we can certainly get some of those out to you and get Jodie to send around some resources to our different treasurers, Owen. I'm sure there's things that have been developed there that can be shared, which would be helpful. Next question, is there any conference view on installing solar systems on suitable churches? So not a view as such. I know that there is examples. I'm thinking maybe within our conference, I know of 2 or 3 churches that put solar panels on back on the day when there used to be a 60-cent payback tariff from the New South Wales government. Unfortunately, that system's long gone due to constraints on the government's finances. But there has been a number of churches that have installed solar systems as a environmentally friendly cost reduction strategy for their church, particularly churches that have high electricity bills. Perhaps the facilities are being used 5, 6, 7 days a week, not just on one day, which is very, very common these days for our church facilities. And that makes a lot of sense. It just has a good business case. I mean, if your solar panels you get a quote and you're going to get some savings that'll pay back the cost of those solar panels within 2 to 5 years, that's a pretty good rate of return. You won't get that rate of return by investing the money in the bank or anywhere else at this time. So that's an excellent return. And once you've recovered the cost of those solar panels for your church in savings on electricity, and it's been paid off, then that's just money for savings for ministries in your church after that. So it's a great long-term strategy. We've got them at our church and had them for many years. And yeah, this makes a lot of sense, as have other churches. So good thing to check out if you don't have something like that. I don't think we have on any preferred supplier or anything of that nature. However, you know, you'll have local people in the area that can furnish quotes for you and those sorts of things. So yeah, look, great questions and strategy. Any more comments, questions on the physical facilities in churches and repairs and maintenance or things like that? If not, we'll move right along to the next section, which is something that's very, very important. Every church has a perspective of growth, some more than others in terms of you know, circumstances of their church, but certainly every church is missional and wants to reach the community for Christ in some way, shape or form. And so I'm going to talk now about funding for evangelism and how it can go about that. So obviously, when you're doing your budget for your church, planning ahead for the next 12 months and beyond, a key consideration will be setting aside some money, if you have some, for evangelism in your local community, and how you know, how that might be done. Quite often, some of the most effective ways of reaching people don't necessarily cost a lot of money. Might just be personal contacts, those sorts of things. However, more often than not, spreading the gospel does require funds and money. So good to have some money set aside in your local church budget. The conference has a capacity to top up some of those funds with some additional support. And so that's covered off here in the conference evangelism funds that you need to be aware of when it's raised, and maybe a church board or your pastor comes and sees you or something as a treasurer to see how much money you've got. You can be aware that you can actually apply to the North New South Wales Conference for some support from time to time for evangelism funds. You can apply any time of the year. Doesn't need to come around budget time or anything like that. Any time of the year when there's a capacity and a willingness to do some evangelism in your local church and it requires funds and you don't have enough, you can apply to the conference. They can approve grants of up to a maximum of 75% of the project costs, which is really handy. And there is a cap on those up to a maximum of $50,000 grant from the conference. However, a lot of churches take advantage of the evangelism funds from the conference, and it's a great strength and asset to our churches. So be familiar with that process. The way that works is there's details in the Church Treasurer's Manual, starting on page 34 and onwards, which I won't bore you to tears with all the detail right now. However, there's processes outlined there where you can just apply to the evangelism department of the conference, who then give consideration to you and get back to you with how much they may or may not approve for your individual projects. So yeah, so that's a very important piece and something that every church faces from time to time. So what else have we got here? So the other thing is getting more back to church facilities. Yeah, from time to time, local church funds are limited, even if you've been very proactive as a local church and saved up. Sometimes the church wants to expand. I get contacted every week around our conference with churches that are wishing, they're in maybe a growth phase, they're wishing to expand, the facilities are too small. Perhaps they're wanting to build some more facilities on their existing land to take advantage of a community outreach, a service project. Perhaps it's an additional Sabbath school room, additional hall. Examples could go on and on. Perhaps it's just an extension of facilities. Might be the amenities blocks. Might be kitchen facilities that are out of date. I can go on and on with examples, but you get the idea. So again, you've got to consider how you're going to fund these things. And obviously, if if you've had a proactive approach, this hasn't probably come out of blue sky and hasn't been a surprise to you. You're aware of, these sort of plans quite often take a long time to hatch with various discussions, board meetings, business meetings. So by all means, typically we'd be contacted at the conference to see what avenues are available for conference support. If there's a shortfall of funds in the local church, you can apply for the North New South Wales Conference Church Building Grant Scheme. It does provide funds for a number of different categories of church buildings. It doesn't really provide money for repairs and maintenance as such. However, the categories it does support, it can provide really important funding for a new church building, 10% of the cost of that, up to a maximum grant of $150,000. That's $150,000 you don't have to fundraise for, you don't have to pay back. It's a great asset, and many churches have taken advantage of that when they're trying to erect a new church facility. Second category is the relocation or rebuild of an existing church. This does happen around our conference. Again, you can apply for a grant to assist with that relocation process. There is another category called the supplementary building category. This covers a range of additional buildings that might be contemplated on the church site, such as I mentioned, a church hall, perhaps a centre of influence or something like that, depending on what we're going to use it for. That provides benefits of up to 20% of the cost of the new building, to a maximum grant of $80,000. There's a couple more categories as well. This one's a renovation, if you like, a major refurbishment of the church. Again, this is rather common. Every month we would have be processing applications for this. 20% of the cost, again, the conference can provide up to a maximum grant of $50,000. And this is a great way to supplement, your existing fundraising. Maybe just get that project over the line so you can get it done in a timely manner. And it also does provide assistance for church signage. The condition on the church signage is, of course, that it must comply with the church signage guidelines. So if you just want to make up your own sign and stick it out the front, you probably won't be very successful under this strategy. But if you're going to have the nice orange logo one with all the compliance with all the church logo and everything like that, we can assist you with grants of up to 80% of the cost of that church signage, up to a cap of $10,000. We can also assist you at the conference, not so much in treasury, but in our communications department with all the technical specs, if you like, for our church signage in terms of colours, logo specs and that sort of thing. And they can be passed on to your local sign writer, who might be able to give you a quote on church signage. So how do we so that's a bit of the way that the North and South Wales Conference Church Building Grant Fund works, to give you a bit of an idea. Again, only of interest to those churches that actually wish to expand their church facilities or do a major renovation and those types of things. So any questions, comments on any of that so far? So those applications just come through me in my office, and we can pass them through our finance committees and so on. So there is other ways, other offerings of the church. Now, some of these are through the South Pacific Division, so we can certainly direct you into the right areas and assist you with all these processes where they're applicable. Unfortunately, at the moment, the South Pacific Division's Church Building Grant Scheme is running dangerously low of funds, so they've put a suspension on any more new applications to that process for another year or so. But just to give you a broad appreciation as to what this fund was designed to do, it was money held at the South Pacific Division, as you might guess, and it was like an endowment fund, so its only source of income was basically interest, and so I think the division had sold some assets many years ago and put them into this fund. They would then once a year, take applications from churches all over Australia and New Zealand. It's a very competitive process, and so only the very, very best applications get through. But it would provide substantial funding for new church buildings. They did focus particularly on large cities and particularly on urban areas, and also on new churches like church plants and that sort of thing that were trying to get established and trying to get a permanent building. So it didn't really help existing churches too much, and didn't help a lot of churches, to be honest, within our conference, because most of our churches are in regional areas, as you can appreciate. However, there is some areas in our conference that have benefited from this fund over the years, namely Central Coast, Newcastle, and I guess areas to the Tweed, just south of the Gold Coast. We managed to sneak those in to this program, which is great. So yeah, the program's, as I mentioned, on hold, so we can't apply at the moment. We've currently got a number of approved grants in the system, but there's no new ones going in at the moment. So that's unfortunate, but that's just that's just because they've run out of money there in that fund. So they're trying to build it up at the moment. So yeah, some of the different criteria here, again, I won't bore you to tears with it, but just get an appreciation that if you think you can, utilize some grant money, just get in contact with us and we can put you in the right directions with all these things and assist you with the applications. So just some of the conditions on the slides as we flick through here, Paulo, around the South Pacific Division Fund and some of the priorities that had, as I've sort of tried to summarise for you. So yeah, just go back one. So the local church loans. Sometimes when you've got facilities, there's been fundraising funds, there's a building fund, you've got a grant from the conference, and there's still a shortfall, but you urgently need to do those works at the church. So that's potentially some churches who are comfortable with taking a small loan. We could have a look and see whether we can get them a loan. There's a couple of avenues for loans, depending on the scale of the project and a number of other factors. So just in brief, we can get a loan from Central Bank. You've got to have 50% of the funds of the project, so they'll only borrow you up to 50%. You've then got to repay it over a 10-year period. The advantage of it, though, is that there's no mortgage or anything on the property. The interest rate's obviously slightly better than what you might get from an external bank like Westpac or something like that. So again, just be aware that those sort of facilities are available. Some churches just don't want to borrow because they just don't have an appetite for it, and so that's fine. But if there is a willingness, then this is one avenue. And repayments normally have to be, annual repayments on the loan have to be less than 40% of your annual tithe. And there's a few KPIs that we can help you with if and when the time comes. So we work very closely with you to see whether you qualify for any of these loans and whether it's going to help you finish your project and whether you can afford them. And if so, we take you through the process and get those approved for you. So that's your local church loans from Central Bank. Any more slides in that pack there, Paulo? Yes. Oh, great. Okay, thanks. So there is other loans available through other banks, be it Westpac or others. Again, for larger projects and perhaps where we can't meet the 50% loan value ratio, we'll potentially go to the market for you. And but obviously along with that comes higher interest rates, mortgages on the property. They're normally repaid over 20 years, which sometimes helps the affordability compared with a 10-year repayment schedule, even though the interest rates are slightly higher. So we look at all that and work that through for you. But that's just a real quick overview of funds that are available to expand the facilities, to increase the mission and impact of the church in the community.
Excuse me, Russell.
Yes.
Sorry, there was a question here from Joy. She's asking, is replacing a carpet regarded as renovation?
Yeah, so just in isolation, some of these items are just repairs and maintenance because it's just replacing something that's worn out. So what we do is we work with churches to, usually if the carpets are going, there's usually other things that need fixing as well. And so sometimes what we'll do is say, right, let's, if the carpet is part of a much larger, comprehensive, major refurbishment of the church, including, expanding the kitchen area, ripping out and replacing and updating, maybe putting a ramp in for the disabled toilets. And, we have a look at a much more larger, it's just, we put that through in its own right as a carpet, it's probably not going to get approved. It's just repairs really and replacing things that are there. But as part of a bigger project, we can put carpets in there. And so we'll work with the church to see what their long-term goals are. Perhaps a larger project with stages in it. We can do stage 1, stage 2, and over time, and we can do a little fundraising in between and that sort of thing. So yeah, we try and work the policy to help churches, not sort of exclude them. And so that's the conversation we would have if someone asked us, can you just help us replace the carpet? Probably not, but we would have a conversation and try and help them in that way, and see whether it was part of a bigger refurbishment or renovation of the church, which is really what the policy is aimed at. So yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Russell. Thank you very much. Owen.
All right. So thank you, everyone. We hope that the information that we've sort of covered this morning has sort of been of help to everyone with the work that you're doing there at the local church. And also feel free to reach out to Paolo and Maxine if you need hands-on training on how to use the software, and if you have any other questions in the future. So yeah. So just one thing, Russell just sort of raised something I'd like to touch on again with the conflicts of interest. Well, we just have a bit of time. We're going back to that. I think can you go back to that front bit there, Paolo. Sort of going over a couple of scenarios that sort of cover the sort of conflict of interest. Is sort of, you can find that on page 7 in the Treasurer's Manual, where it sort of gives a couple of examples on the conflict of interest that could exist. One there is sort of where a member of the church board is also a building contractor and would be quoting a price on the church for the building extension that's about to happen. Okay, so in that case, that board member should excuse themselves from the meeting during that discussion. Okay, so that's an example of when if those sort of issues come up, that that we make sure that that particular person would excuse themselves from the deliberations on the price and the quotes that have been given. Another one there is where you're reimbursing yourself for approved purchases, and you're also the signatory on the church bank account. So we're just sort of advised that that you would, if you are reimbursing yourself, that the payment is signed by 2 other people, just to sort of cover yourself in that sort of instance. Another thing that that we've sort of been talking about is having a register of all your board members and any conflict of interest statements that could come with it, and that's sort of constantly reviewed during your board and business meetings throughout the year. All right. Are there any other questions, any clarifications on the information that we've sort of covered today? So we've made some good time today. We've covered it in less than the 3.5 hours that we initially sort of thought it would take.
There is a question here from Vernon Wood. Where a Pathfinder club has been set up as an input tax sub-entity, how do you recommend its accounting be set up? How is auditing cared for? Russell, I think you've had, you said before that you were a Pathfinder club leader for 7 years. Do you recall, what sort of recommendations could you give in this, for these kind of things?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit on the size of the club as to what you might do. So the club that I was running had about 100 members, so it was kind of big enough to have, so we had our own separate treasurer appointed by the club that used to independently of the club director, pay the bills and collect the fees. We didn't have any accounting system as such, Vernon. It was just done off the bank accounts. We had a few bank accounts. I think we had one to earn a bit of interest, one for our working account to pay the bills, and there was another one where we were using to save up for camporees and some of those big events. But that was just a cash thing, so we didn't get any more complicated than that. And then we would produce the accountability piece for the church was our treasurer would produce a financial statement quarterly basis, just on a spreadsheet. That would be presented to our Pathfinder leadership team for sign off, and then ultimately the church business meeting as an accountability of part of the church accounts, if you like. But it was actually prepared by our Pathfinder treasurer. The same process could be done with the church treasurer doing the report for a smaller club, or any variations of that. Or you might have some. There's probably not enough volume there for a separate accounting package. We did have a membership software that we set up where people could pay their fees online, and that handled all that sort of thing. So that probably made it a lot easier. But again, depends on the size of the club and the volumes as to whether all that's sort of worth it or not, and the capacity of the club. So I don't recall us getting audited, but those records would be made available when the church got audited if required, and because they're part of the church account still, even though they're a sub entity for GST. So yeah.
Very good, thank you. Well, I hope that answers Vernon's question. There was something else also from Kim. She was asking about questions regarding the Sabbath school pamphlets money and also K-Church payments, which she said she will discuss with me in a separate time. But just regarding the Sabbath school pamphlets, there is GST on those. So we need to record GST on any monies that a member has written on their tithe envelope. Sometimes they write Sabbath school pamphlet. When you enter that into TORS as income, you will have to select the GST code there, because we need to submit the GST to the tax office. And then she also had another question on K-Church, which she says she will contact us on a separate time. Any more questions, comments? Otherwise, that's it. Unless Owen has anything else to say, or?
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. We truly appreciate the work that you're doing at the local church. It's our churches can't function without volunteer help, and especially within the treasury work, it's there's quite a it's getting harder and harder to find those that are willing to take it up because of the governance issue, the governance workloads that comes with it. But we really appreciate it, and we do ask that if you feel free to reach out to us, and if you're needing a hand, and we can help you along with any queries and any issues that you may encounter along the way. So yeah, so we'll hopefully we'll plan to have a few of these updates throughout the year, and the Zoom sort of made it quite easy to reach a lot of our churches now spread across the conference. So we'll definitely be planning one or two more of these gatherings throughout the year, and if there's any new updates that come up. And also with the rollout of the new software, once that's sort of bedded down, we'll be having a initial sort of overview of the new software, and then an individual training session and rollover into the new software once that's ready. So we'll keep you up to date with where that's sort of heading, and any time frames that will, once that's sort of we'll sort of figured out what's happening in that space. But yeah, so thank you everyone, and I could just ask Russell if he could close us off with a word of prayer.
Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, what a privilege it is to just come before you, and thank you for the meeting that we've had here this morning. Covered a lot of information, Lord, not all of it applicable to every church, but certainly given a broad overview of the different aspects that it can impact the local treasurer's role. For those that are new to the role, we pray a special blessing on them as they learn about the new role, get into it. We pray that you'll give them adequate support and teams in the local church, assistants and so on and so forth, that can share the load, and that they can be good stewards of the funds that go through their local churches. Blessing on them and their families as they start the new role. We think of those that have been in the role for some time and have got it down to a fine art by now, Lord. We pray that they'll continue to serve with wisdom, humility, and with the knowledge that with you all things are possible. We pray for a blessing on all our team. Think of our friends there at the conference on the local church support desk, fielding questions on a daily basis, assisting those, trying to navigate their roles and sorting out issues. Pray for Pauline, Maxine, Owen and others there at the conference, that they might be blessed by you today, and know that you are with them. These things we pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Just before we close off, there was a quick question from Regine about some invoices from Better Books and Food. If you could email me directly with more details on that question, then I can help you out. My email is paulorodriguez@adventist.org.au, Regine. And yeah, so that's all. That's all from me. And thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And hope you have a great rest of the weekend.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.